They say there are laughs that do not bring light, laughs that are not born of joy, but of cruelty. And when such a laugh echoes in a solemn place where justice is meant to dwell, it becomes a shadow capable of devouring everything around it. I was there, seated discreetly among strangers, listening to the groan of the old courthouse air conditioner and feeling the chill that slid down the walls. The air smelled of old paper and reheated coffee, the kind that lingers in windowless hallways. And yet, there was something more, something invisible, as if the atmosphere itself were saturated with untold stories, with tears shed in silence, with words never written into the records. In front of me, a fragile figure occupied the defendant's seat. She was an elderly woman, her gray hair tangled like forgotten clouds scattered by the wind. Her face seemed sculpted by time, each wrinkle a scar, each mark a memory only she could decipher. Her thin, trembling hands clutched a worn piece of cloth, perhaps the last object that still carried some trace of home. They called her homeless, as though that single word could ever define her. But I knew, no one is ever just a word. Behind every label lies an entire life woven from choices, losses, and secrets. The judge entered in haste, his dock robe swaying like a heavy curtain. His deep voice announced the opening of the hearing, but his eyes did not see a person before him. I saw only disdain, a look that judged before even listening. And when the elderly woman lifted her head with effort to answer a question, he laughed. Yes, he laughed. It was quick, almost a whisper, but audible. A short, dry laugh soaked in contempt. And in that instant, the air seemed to freeze. Some present averted their gaze, ashamed to witness the scene. Others shifted uneasily in their seats, pretending indifference. But I saw, I felt. The sound of that laugh was not merely human. It was a dagger driven into the dignity of someone who already carried too much weight. The woman, however, did not bow. And that was when I perceived something extraordinary. Despite the humiliation, there was in her a strange, silent dignity. She did not beg, did not cry, did not shout. She simply held her gaze steady, as if waiting for something, or for someone. Time in that room felt different, as though minutes dragged on. The distant ticking of a wall clock reminded me that life went on outside. But inside, there was only silence, restrained breaths, and the rustle of pages turned by a bored clerk. The charges against her were vague, almost absurd, minor offenses tied to survival, occupying public space, taking discarded food, sleeping where she shouldn't. To some, crimes. To others, mere proof that life can be merciless. And still, the judge treated it all as if it were a trivial play, unworthy of his attention. His laugh echoed, even after it ceased, and everyone there seemed diminished, powerless to intervene. Then the courtroom doors opened. The sound echoed across the marble floor, firm and solemn. Heads turned. The judge lifted his eyes, irritated at the interruption. And in that moment, a presence entered that would change everything. It was a tall man, posture erect, his dark suit perfectly tailored, as if he needed no introduction to command respect. His steps were measured, assured, but his eyes were what transformed the atmosphere. They were firm, intense, and yet carried a tenderness difficult to describe. He walked straight to the woman, and, to everyone's astonishment, he knelt before her. Yes, he knelt as one would before a living altar. He took the old woman's trembling hands and kissed them with reverence, and then his voice pierced the silence. "Grandmother, forgive me for being late." A murmur rippled through the room. People exchanged incredulous glances, and the judge, for a moment, the judge lost his mask of arrogance. His expression crumbled as if something had disarmed him. That woman, who seconds earlier was merely the homeless one, was grandmother to one of the most respected lawyers in the country, a man known for taking on impossible cases, for overturning unjust rulings, for refusing to bow to power. And now, before us, he was not just a lawyer, he was a grandson. I remember well what I felt. It was as though a flame had been lit in the cold of that room, and for the first time, I saw in the grandmother's eyes not only pain, but pride. Sometimes life seems to strip us of everything, but there are things time and cruelty cannot take. The invisible bonds that unite us, the secret strength of love. And that was what began to reveal itself. When that man knelt before his grandmother, no one could deny the symbolic weight of the gesture. The courtroom, once filled with neglect and cruel laughter, was now frozen. The old woman's eyes, brimming with tears, seemed to shine anew. There was pain, yes, but also the spark of a reunion carrying centuries of silence. The judge cleared his throat, uneasy. He tried to compose himself, hiding his surprise beneath a mask of formality. But his hands, once steady over the case files, now trembled slightly. "What is the meaning of this?" he asked, his voice louder than necessary, as if volume could hide his disquiet. The man rose calmly, still holding his grandmother's hands. He fixed his gaze at the judge, but did not answer at once. It was as if each second of silence was an answer in itself, until, finally, he spoke. "It means this. This woman is not alone, and any word of scorn directed at her is also directed at me." A shiver ran through the room. It was as though justice itself, so often distant, had finally found a true voice. The judge coughed, shuffled papers, tried to look away, but there was no escape. While all eyes were on the grandson's words, mine were on her. The grandmother, her tired face was like an open book. Few knew how to read. There were marks of sleepless nights, of hunger, of the humiliation of being ignored in the streets. But there was also something deeper glimmering in her eyes, a silent wisdom, as if she held memories too vast for that cold space. In that instant, I realized the true story was not only the clash between judge and lawyer. It was her. It was what she carried without ever telling. And perhaps that was what we were all about to discover. The grandmother sighed. The sound was so soft, yet so full of meaning, it seemed to cross time itself. And for a moment, the room disappeared. I saw, like a reflection, fragments of her life, not because anyone described them, but because the atmosphere itself carried them, as if an invisible force allowed us to almost see. I saw a young woman, long braids down her back, cradling a baby in her arms. I saw calloused hands washing clothes in a cold river while her children waited nearby. I saw a simple home, built with effort, collapsing in silence when illness took her husband too soon. And then the chain of losses. A son lost to violence, another vanished without a trace, until only one remained, the youngest one, with curious eyes, the same who now stood before her as a lawyer. It was for him she endured. It was for him she withstood cold nights, hunger, looks of disdain, and it was for him she never let despair extinguish the flame of hope. "I demand respect for this court," the judge finally said, attempting to regain authority. "This is a trial, not a theater." The lawyer drew a deep breath, but stood unshaken. "With all due respect, Your Honor, if there is theater here, it is not on this." And when those layers begin to peel away, truth can illuminate or wound. In that courtroom, it was not merely a legal sentence at stake. It was the dignity of a woman, and perhaps the fate of all who dared to laugh at what they did not understand. The silence was so profound, one could hear the faint crack of the old wooden benches. Everyone waited for what would come next. The judge shuffled papers as though turning pages could restore his control. But control was no longer his. The grandmother, with the serenity of one who had faced storms far worse, drew a deep breath and fixed her gaze on him. Her voice came firm, almost solemn. "There are things that do not fit in criminal records. There are stories that are never written in reports. If you wish to laugh, laugh, but know that every line on that paper tells not who I am, only what I survived." A shiver ran through the audience, and the judge, for the first time, seemed cornered. The grandson stepped forward, his voice resonant and steady. "Your Honor, I ask you to weigh your words. The woman before us is a citizen worthy of respect, not scorn. And if need be, I will take this trial to higher courts. This courtroom is no stage for humiliation." Whispers stirred. Something had shifted. This was no longer just a legal proceeding. It was a confrontation between arrogance and dignity. The judge frowned but remained silent. Perhaps he knew that any word spoken now could be used against him. And then something unexpected happened. The grandmother lifted her trembling hands and asked to speak. Tears glistened in her eyes, but so did newfound courage. "My son," she said, looking at her grandson, "there are things you don't know, things I hid out of shame, out of fear. But perhaps it is time to tell them, not to defend myself, but so they will understand." The lawyer bent close to her, tenderly, as if protecting a living relic. "Grandma, you don't need to expose yourself. I am here to fight for you." But she shook her head. "No, my dear, this fight is not only mine. It belongs to all who were ever ridiculed, forgotten, treated as nothing, and someone must tell the truth." Her voice gained strength as she went on. "Years ago, when I still had my children with me, I did something the law would never forgive. I stole bread. I stole milk. I stole to feed those who were hungry. I was arrested, judged, and marked forever. After that, I lost my job, lost my home, lost nearly everything. And so, every step of my life was stained by that mistake." The room stayed utterly silent. The judge adjusted his glasses, pleased to see her past exposed. But before he could react, she continued, "I carry that mark to this day, but let it be known, I did not steal out of greed, nor out of vice. I stole because no mother can bear the sound of a starving child's cry. If that is a crime, then let it be carved in stone, for I would do it again." An emotional murmur rippled through the audience. Some discreetly wiped away tears, and for the first time, the judge's laughter seemed small, petty beside the grandeur of her words. But that was not all. There was something more, hidden in the shadows of memory, and the grandmother, breathing deeply, released the revelation that would forever change the meaning of that story. At that time, Your Honor, when I was judged and condemned, I received help, but not from whom I expected. There was a young intern in the court. He looked at me differently than anyone else, not as a criminal, but as a human being. He was the one who brought me a glass of water, who silently told me I was not alone. That young man was you. The silence fell like thunder. Everyone turned to the judge. He froze, his face pale. It was as if his mask of authority had shattered. The grandmother went on. "Yes, Your Honor, I recognized you the moment I saw you. Time changes faces, but it does not erase eyes. And so when I heard you laugh at me today, it was as though the past pierced me again. The same young man who once saw my humanity now hides behind a robe and arrogance." The impact was devastating. The entire courtroom was in shock, and the judge, he could not deny it. His lips trembled, his eyes welled, and for a moment he was no longer a judge, but a man broken by the memory of who he had once been. The grandson placed a hand on his grandmother's shoulder, moved. "So that's it. Your story intertwines even with the one who now judges you, which proves, Your Honor, that life has its ways of returning to us what we once gave to others." The judge lowered his head. There was no sentence he could pronounce without betraying himself. And in the silence that followed, all understood. True justice had already been done, not in the records, but in the consciences of those present. The hearing was adjourned. The grandmother left the court supported by her grandson, but not as a defendant. She left as a symbol of resilience, of dignity, and of a truth no one could erase. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold. And for a moment, I felt as though even time itself bowed before her. There are laughs that wound and silences that set free. Her story taught me that no one is merely what records say or what society chooses to see. Every life is a riddle woven of pain and choices, of mistakes and endurance. And perhaps the greatest irony of existence is this: one day we laugh at what we do not understand, and the next we are forced to face the truth that we could have been in that very place. The grandmother did not win only in court. She won because she revealed the essence of humanity, the ability to endure, to forgive, and even to remember, even when the other would rather forget. And you, listening now, how many times have you laughed at what you did not understand? How many times have you judged without truly knowing? The world is full of such stories, hidden behind weary eyes, calloused hands, and worn-out clothes. One only needs the courage to listen. This is just one of the stories I've been told. If you wish to hear others, you know where to find me.